Good evening, community members. Before we go any further, we want to take a moment to mention that tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be shared on our Facebook page and website, wcachicago.org. It's also being requested that if anyone else is recording or any media is in attendance, please drop a note in the chat box. I'm Carla Agostinelli, Director of Development and Community Partnerships for West Central Association. West Central Association is the delegate agency for the City of Chicago for both the Department of Planning and Development and Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. We are also the service provider for Greektown SSA number 16. Our service area is bound by Grand to 16th Street, Wells to California. West Central Association collaborates with various aldermen and departments within the City of Chicago as a host to a variety of community meetings. For this reason, we encourage everyone to sign up for our newsletter mailing list at wcachicago.org. This is the main method used to notify the community of these meetings. In collaboration with Alderman Burnett Jr., the Department of Planning and Development, and the Chicago Department of Transportation, we are hosting a virtual community webinar tonight regarding the results of the Fulton Market Traffic Study. Your understanding, patience, and flexibility have been much appreciated. Chicago is experiencing an asylum seeker humanitarian crisis. Alderman Burnett will be speaking at a last-minute meeting with the mayor's office tonight at Union Park regarding this subject. The decision to prioritize one meeting over another was based on careful evaluation of the importance, relevance, and potential consequences of missing either meeting. Representing the 27th Ward tonight is Reginald Stewart, Chief of Staff for Alderman Burnett and the Chairman for the Committee on Pedestrian and Traffic Safety. All Q&A will take place after the presentation. It is requested that you please drop your questions or comments in the chat box. Also, a quick reminder to please try and keep any questions related to this specific to the results of the Fulton Market Traffic Study. And now I'd like to introduce President of the West Central Association Board of Directors, Armando Chacon.
Thank you, Carla, and thanks for those in attendance virtually here tonight. First, I just want to say I'm actually excited to have this conversation tonight as it relates to traffic and any possible changes. Some of us can remember some of our streets being semi-highways, and now we now know that that's changed, and there's stop signs almost on every block, and things have changed a lot in the neighborhood. And I think there's we have new issues to contend with, certainly as it relates to traffic flow. I want to thank Alderman Burnett for being a big driver and just having this conversation and the study and asking CDOT to take a look at the issues that we're dealing with as it relates to traffic flow. But we're fortunate to have the people that can affect change involved, and hopefully for the best. So I'm excited to obviously engage in the greater community and having this conversation as we think about first, I guess, just sort of hearing what some of the details of the study, and maybe even discuss some possible changes that hopefully will make a positive impact. There is no silver bullet. There is no perfect solution that will totally alleviate some of the traffic problems that we have, but certainly if we can make improvement, that's why we're here. So with that, I want to hand it over to Alderman Burnett, Chief of Staff, Reggie Stewart. Reggie, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you for letting me be here. I just want to sit back and listen and hear what the outcome is, and then I want us to collaborate on what we can do to make these changes better. The alderman's not here, he has another meeting, and I'm just sitting in and listening. Thank you. Hello?
Thanks for that, Reggie. Thank you.
Thank
So
you, Richie.
Carla, hand it back to you, and I believe we are now,
Yeah,
let me hand it over back to you. You tell us where we go from here.
thank you. I think from here, we're gonna go straight to Steve, correct? Hey there, Steve.
Hi there, sure. Let me share my screen here and we can start this off. Okay. Can everybody see the presentation?
Just to jump in, I don't know if the CDOT and DPD staff should say hello, just as a quick introduction.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Carl Schwarzer. I noticed now my panelist link was misspelled a little bit. It's SCHWARZER, just for your information. But I'm Assistant Chief Traffic Engineer for the City of Chicago. With us tonight, we have Molly Samadi. I don't know if she wants to say hello herself.
Hello, I'm Chief Traffic Engineer with CDOT. And this request came to us about 7-8 years ago. Alderman asking for directional change in this area. Obviously, the density has changed and curbside activity has changed. And we thought to go ahead and conduct a full comprehensive traffic study to see if any changes can be made to direction of the streets and change the curbside activities.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. So as you can see on the screen here, we'll get to this momentarily, but in order to do the traffic study, we commissioned Civil Tech Engineering, and we have Steve Pouch and Mark Shorey from Civil Tech here to present on the study. And just to complete the introductions, we also have a couple of members from DPD that work closely with the West Central Association, Fernando Esposito and Heidi Sperry. So I think with that, we're probably ready to turn it over to Steve now.
Right, thanks, Carl. Yeah, so let's jump in. We'll talk about what we've been doing and what we found and some possible changes to consider. So just a little history here. As Molly mentioned, things have been changing. We all know that Fulton Market, it's growing, it's expanding, and some of these changes have led to concerns from people from Alderman's office about traffic flow and safety. So as part of that, requests have come in to make streets one way to alleviate some of that congestion. And a couple of years ago, a project started in the design phase to improve railroad grade crossings at the Metro crossings at some of the streets, north-south streets in Fulton Market area. And so as part of that, a decision needs to be made for the gate design, whether the streets should be one way or two way. So thought that was the perfect time to start this study off and work with that project and all these other factors that are going on to figure out whether any street direction changes need to be made. So in coordination with the Alderman's office, some funding was identified both through TIF and through the Alderman's menu to start this study. And this study will be looking, or has been looking at 85 intersections within Fulton Market. The limits being Hubbard on the north, Ogden on the west, Washington on the south, and then Halstead on the east. We've been collecting traffic data. We've also been looking at crashes throughout the study area, and looking at some other infrastructure needs. Pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, chief among those, and looking at curbside use. So we'll be talking about a few of these elements tonight, but really we want to focus on this street direction conversation, and that's where we're looking for community input and some feedback. I mentioned crash analysis. This is a map here that shows the past 5 years, full years of crash data. Not surprisingly, this is a hotspot map, and it shows these darker shaded areas in red here show where there's a higher concentration of crashes, and not surprisingly, those are along Halsted and Lake, with a particular notable area here at Hubbard and Halsted, which is experiencing far more crashes than any other intersection in the study area. So with that, the Chicago Department of Transportation is in the process of designing a traffic signal there, which will be constructed, I think next year. So that process is moving. Once that's installed, I think this crash situation here will improve. Another part of the crash analysis that's fairly directly linked to the one-way conversation is sideswipe and parked car crashes. So this map here shows where there have been parked car and sideswipe crashes over the past 5 years. You can see where they're concentrated along Halsted, a little bit here on Racine, particularly narrow portions of Racine. And then also kind of towards the eastern part of the study area, with a surprising amount being here on showing up on Green Street. Part of our data collection, we're being very multimodal. We're collecting all types of data. This map here shows the bike volumes that were observed over a 24-hour period. I just want to say this is probably more of an order of magnitude type, way to compare one street to another, just because bike volumes are so variable, depending on the weather, depending on the time of year. But you can see the streets that are experiencing heavier bike traffic than others. And then traffic volumes. This is the number of cars that were counted on each street in a 24-hour period. So most traffic by far is on Ogden here in the West End. Of course, Lake and Halsted also have fairly heavy volumes here compared to the other streets. The north-south streets, the volumes are fairly similar, somewhere in that, most of them are in that 2,000 to 4,000 car per day range. The one that sticks out here is Green Street, where there's more than 7,000 vehicles per day traveling along that street. So, what is an ADT volume like? What is that? How do those compare to other streets in Chicago? So this chart here shows the types of volumes that you can expect on typical streets in Chicago. So Ogden is up here. That's the 4-lane arterial street with left turn lanes. Most of the other more major streets are in this kind of this 8,000 range. So you're talking about the 2-lane streets like Halsted, like Lake Street, and then most of the north-south streets are somewhere kind of in this area here on the high end of a local street volume, or maybe on the very lower end of just a standard 2-lane street without left turn lanes. So most of the streets we're seeing they're not extremely heavy volumes like you'd see in some other really dense areas like River North. And I think that's just due to the geography of Fulton Market area, where a lot of the streets are discontinuous. They don't run across they don't connect to other streets outside of Fulton Market. So that's helping to keep the volumes fairly low. This graph here, I think, is really interesting. And if there's any business people here, I think they could find this interesting too, just kind of showing what traffic is looking like on a typical street in Fulton Market over 3 different years. So blue line is 2018, so that's really the kind of the pre-COVID benchmark. You can see in 2018 where the volumes experience distinct AM and PM peaks, and kind of a lower lower traffic period during the middle of the day. Then in 2021, these volumes were collected, I would say probably around fall, September, October time, 2021. Volumes are pretty flat. They rise a little bit in the evening, but not that much. And recently we went out and collected some data. We wanted to see what's going on there now. How have things recovered? And it's interesting. There's really not much of a morning peak. So this red line here through the 7, 8, 9 a.m. period is showing fairly flat volumes. A little bit of a bump in the middle of the day, but then the PM peak is definitely recovered, and in fact, it's even longer. So the PM, the time of day when there's kind of the evening rush, so to speak, is elongated from almost really early afternoon at this 2 o'clock time all the way through 7. So so traffic volumes throughout the day are fairly similar, 2018 to 2023, but the time that people are traveling is a little bit different. This is a final exhibit here related to traffic volumes. So when thinking about potential conversions to one-way, we wanted to see if traffic is moving in one particular direction versus another. So is there a predominant flow northbound or southbound? So these arrows here show the predominant traffic flow, but then the darker the blue line, the more pronounced that movement is. So you want really, it's where you see these dark blue lines where there's a significant pattern one direction or the other. And so what we found is, for the most part, traffic is fairly even northbound versus southbound on most of these streets, with the notable exception of Racine Avenue. And Racine is seeing a lot more southbound traffic than northbound traffic. Most likely because it's kind of an extension of the Kennedy inbound exit ramp where people come in and then travel south, and Racine use that to enter the city, especially the west side of Chicago. And then to a little bit lesser extent, May is acting as a complement to Racine, call it a one-way pair. Even though it's a two-way street, there's a little bit more northbound traffic on May than Racine. As you can see with these little darker blue lines up, especially towards the northern part of the study area. Some other data that we've collected, street widths and potential pinch points is what this graphic here illustrates. The red lines here are streets that are less than 34 feet wide, which we consider to be a little bit on the narrow side, especially if there's parking allowed on both sides. So you see that mainly on Racine here, also on Ada Street, with a couple of other pinch points. There's a little narrow spot on Morgan south of Lake, and then also on Green south of Wayman. Some other pinch points that we've shown on this map here. These blue stars are they indicate a significant restaurant or hotel use. So those are spots where there's often valet or others pronounced curbside activity, and perhaps places where there would more likely be double parking. See that mostly in the eastern part of the study area, and then also diagonal parking to these slash marks here. Those diagonal parking can add a little bit of friction, especially when there's a high turnover, lots of cars pulling in and out, can slow traffic a bit. So we wanted to show those locations. When considering one-way versus two-way travel, there's it's kind of a inherent set of positives and negatives to each configuration. So we wanted to think about each one of those when considering potential directional changes. So these are shown on the screen here. So benefits would be for one-way streets, wherever there's double parking or construction, there'd be fewer delays as cars can more easily navigate around the obstruction. Many cases, one-way streets can lessen the risk of sideswipe or even parked car crashes, especially when the streets are really narrow. If you're crossing the street, you only have to look one direction for approaching traffic for one-way streets. And one-way streets can also free up space to install other amenities within the right-of-way. So probably the most common example would be bike lanes, making room to install bike lanes. But there's also some trade-offs, some challenges if one-way streets. Because there is more room, vehicles may tend to travel more quickly. Drivers may be more aggressive, especially if complementary changes like bump outs or other ways to visually narrow the street aren't made. With one-way streets, travel times and distances can be higher as motorists circle the block to get to their destination. There's a little bit more out-of-way travel. With one-way streets, there's a potential for wrong-way traffic that doesn't exist with two-way streets. Although that can be mitigated with good signage and striping. And oftentimes, if there is wrong-way traffic, it's happening right after the direction of the street is converted, and generally tends to work itself out after a few weeks. And with one-way streets, the traffic that's going in the other direction has to go somewhere, so it's going to be displaced to adjacent street. So for that reason, usually when we're converting streets to one-way, you like to do them in pairs. So if one's going northbound, you like to have a complement going southbound. So now for the big reveal. This map here shows what we're proposing in terms of one-way streets. I'm going to go through and discuss each one of these in more detail, but I just wanted to show this overview map here. You'll see that it's not all streets. In fact, it's fewer than half of the north-south streets. We found, with the traffic volumes now and even in the future, that they can two-way traffic can easily be handled on most of the streets, and that the benefits of maintaining two-way operation outweigh the disadvantages. So let's talk about each one of these. We'll start with Green Street, which I'm sure everybody here on the call or in this meeting, they're familiar with Green Street and some of the issues there. very frequent loading activity up and down the block. A lot of double parking, and also heavier traffic volumes than a lot of the other north-south streets in the area. So that when there is that double parking, it causes issues because there's more people that want to get through there. So looking at the data, and we're proposing to make Green Street one-way southbound between Lake and Washington. Those two blocks there. I think they experience some of the most acute issues. Going north of Lake, we did look at converting Green to one way, but with the disconnected street network up here, and the westbound direction on Fulton, eastbound on Wayman, just really added a lot of challenges, and we didn't think it was a good idea to extend that conversion further to the north. But I think these two blocks here, I think would mitigate a lot of the issues that we've been hearing. I know that CDOT's been hearing from the community. At the end of the presentation today, we can discuss this and then the other recommendations. But I will go to the next street here that we'll talk about now. Morgan, we're not proposing changing it to one way, although we have heard lots of complaints about this area here south of Lake. There's quite a bit of double parking next to all these restaurant storefronts, which is a problem given this bump out here. So this parking occurs within the traffic lane, and it blocks up traffic. It really makes the street a little bit too narrow. And it happens on both sides of Morgan. But we don't think that changing the street to one way is the correct approach here. We're coordinating with the Alderman's office to come up with some other ideas to mitigate this, including designating some areas near the curb extension as standing zones. So hopefully shifting some of that traffic elsewhere. So that's the curbside management strategies that I'm talking about. Will hopefully mitigate that issue with the double parking, or the parking in the travel lane near Lake Street on Morgan. Racine and May. So we're looking at Racine as a one-way southbound street, extending south from Grand, where it's already one-way southbound to the north of Grand, and just continuing that one-way south throughout the study area down to Washington Street. As some of the previous slides showed, Racine is a really narrow street, some parts 30 feet wide, and with a predominantly southbound traffic flow. It makes sense, I think, for southbound traffic there, and then as a one-way complement to that would be May Street, with the directional change, the limits of there being Washington on the south and Grand on the north. So we think that this one-way pair of Racine and May would increase safety through here by reducing risk of sideswipe crashes. It would improve traffic flow, especially in Racine where it's really narrow and there's pinch points. And then also, quite importantly, converting these streets to one way would free up some space to install some bike facilities, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, but I just want to mention that now. Right now, there's no no marked bike routes in the Fulton Market area once you go east of or go west of Halstead. And finally, 8th Street, which is also 30 feet wide, fairly narrow, lots of parking. So converting Ada to one way, either northbound or southbound, we don't really have a preference based on the data. So that would be something that could be discussed. I'd love people's input who are on the call today. But 8th Street, one way, it'd be fairly easy change to make because this is one of the streets in Fulton Market that doesn't cross the metro tracks, so it doesn't require coordination with the railroad improvement project. So that's the one way, and I just want to touch here a little bit on some of the other infrastructure improvements that are being either recommended or we're aware of that are in progress right now. Mentioned the rail track crossing improvements shown here, these yellow boxes, and of the streets that we're recommending one way, Racine and May require that close coordination between the grade crossing projects and the street direction conversion. There's a number of traffic signals that are either in the design phase or in the planning phase. So those are shown either in this blue color here, or in this purple color up here. You see on Grand, and then some this not a new signal, but traffic signal upgrades here at Ogden and Hubbard. And then also intersection realignment project, which is contemplated here at Kinsey and Racine, where there's a little bit of there's a triangle here, and I'm closing one leg of that triangle to realign the street and make things a little bit safer. Here's our potential ideas for bike routes through the Fulton Market area. So I'd mentioned the one-way conversions on Racine and May would free up space to allow installation of bike facilities throughout Fulton Market area, providing nice access to cyclists. So that's something that's just kind of in the planning stages right now and requires a little bit more conversation, but we wanted to show it here now just to show that it is being talked about, as is bike facilities on Morgan, where Morgan is really fairly wide south of Lake Street. And there's space to install buffered bike lane on Morgan fairly easily with striping and no physical changes to the roadway. This graphic here shows other projects that are in the works, bicycle and pedestrian projects. Quite a lot of them here in the southern or just outside of the southern boundary of the study area on Washington, Madison, and Randolph, as well as to the north of the study area on Grand, and then a long-term study to evaluate a north-south bicycle connection through the eastern part of Fulton Market here. So next steps for this study. So we like feedback. That's why we're here. We're in the process of gathering feedback from stakeholders and incorporating that into the study. So we'd love to hear from you all. That feedback will help us finalize the recommendations for one-way street conversion, which is necessary to do before the railroad gate crossing improvements can proceed. So once all that's finalized, we'll be finishing up the report that's going to incorporate all those recommendations, finalizing that, submitting that, and then helping to prepare cost estimates and even identify funding for some of the infrastructure projects. So when are the one-way streets? When could they possibly happen? What's the earliest they could happen? So Green Street and Ada Street, we can consider those as pilot projects because they don't cross the rail tracks. And there's not a lot of infrastructure, mainly just signage and striping that would be involved in changing the direction. We can do that really quickly, perhaps within a few month period once the decision's made. So, and the benefit of the potential one-way conversions on Green and Ada, because it is a pilot, because it's really low cost. You could change the direction, and if things don't work out, it's easy to change the direction to the opposite direction or make it back to two-way. So that's a real nice aspect of that. Racine and May are a little bit more complicated. So once the once the determination is made to convert it to those streets to one way, pretty much locked in over a long period of time, because the railroad gates have to be designed to accommodate whichever direction is chosen. So, and since that's a fairly expensive proposition to deal with railroad and railroad equipment, once that's made, that's the way it's going to be for a while. So, and that one-way conversion would occur at the same time that those railroad gates are modified, which is likely in 2026 or 2027. And then the bike infrastructure potentially would be installed at the same time that the streets are converted to one-way. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I don't know if Carl or Molly, if you want to add anything, or if we want to just go into the questions now.
I think you covered everything, so we should just go to questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. One of the first comments or questions was from Laura Perlman. Unfortunately, you always have to look both ways. Cars are always going the wrong way. That was a dangerous statement, in my opinion. Noted. From Sam Marturina, the developer already committed to install a traffic signal at May and Grand. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that.
Thanks. Noted. Thank you.
Okay. James Craig, what's the bike lane planning look like for notorious intersections like Hubbard and Halsted?
Okay. Carl, you want to answer that?
Well, I would just share that, at this point, we're still presenting the one-way conversion even as, our recommendation. This is kind of step one in that process. We just note that, a one-way conversion could potentially free up that space if that's something that ultimately wants to be followed up on. And with that said, obviously when it gets to the design stage, everything's going to be factored into that design. I think there's also going to be some follow-up questions looking ahead at the list. There are, future changes planned for Randolph as well. So there's a lot of kind of overlapping projects here, and a lot of design would go into it. And I to a certain extent, I imagine there's going to be a public engagement process when it gets to that actual design stage as well.
Thank you. Will this deck be made available after the meeting? Will this be public? Are we allowed to post it and share?
Molly, I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
It's public. I mean,
Yeah, that's
you're
what I felt too.
presenting
Just
it,
wanted to
so
make sure.
absolutely, yes.
Yes, by all
Okay.
means.
Yes.
Yes, this
Wonderful,
can be
thank
shared.
you. Thank you. From Matt Letourneau, thanks to CDOT, DPD, and Civitech for conducting this study. Please describe how you would address the one-way termini at busy Randolph Street. Please also address the study of Randolph that was initiated at the beginning of the pandemic, but has not progressed since then.
Yeah, much like the bike lane, that's obviously something that will be, we'll take a real engineering look at that. A lot of design and preparation will go into it. As far as the Randolph study goes, my understanding is that it is still a phase 1 study. It is progressing. It's still underway, and more updates should be coming in the future.
Great. Also from Matt Letourneau, apart from the one-way proposals, will signal timing improvements, protected turn movements, or other measures be applied in the near term? When will new signals be installed along Lake Street?
Yeah, as we noted on that exhibit showing potential improvements, some of those signals, it's a mix of some are design is underway, some are being studied as part of a future CDOT-led project. Some of them are tied to individual developments. So in some ways, they're on individual timelines, and we can certainly look into that. We don't have that specific information with us today.
The answer actually to is so specific regarding for instance, the requirement for left-hand lane, left-hand signal, right-hand signal, timing, optimization of timing is gonna be as part of those projects. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sorry about that. I kind of skipped over the first portion of the question.
Thank you so much for the clarification. Sam Martirina is asking, can you guys do a shorter presentation at our October 2nd Neighbors of River West meeting at St. John Cantius Church? A lot of our members were called into an emergency migrant meeting tonight at the same time.
We will work with Alderman's office and try to make that.
Wonderful. The next question, Nora Flint, I may have missed it, but was any consideration given to a stoplight on Randolph and Green or Randolph and Peoria?
So as part of the study, we are looking at traffic signal warrants at any of the intersections where there seems to be a need. So that is, looking at traffic signal warrants is part of the scope of the study. I don't think at this point that warrants are necessarily met, but we can take another look at that.
Thank you. Matt Letourneau has a few questions. Neighbors of West Loop had previously proposed one-way streets elsewhere in the neighborhood, but CDOT cited excessive speeds as a reason not to implement them. Why does the team now feel that one-way streets are suitable?
So I can answer that question. This is the reason we embarked on a comprehensive study, because previously we received, in various streets, directional change and, piecemealing things without looking at the entire boundary of a section of the street is of the say, in this case, Fulton Market, it's hard to really know that if you change the direction of the street, what impact is going to do in other streets. Now that you can see that we have done data collection, crash analysis, which direction each street is leaning towards already, it has helped us to decide like which streets can be considered for conversion.
Thank you for that.
I'll just add too, like a lot of the streets in Fulton Market, they're very short block lengths, and the width is already, fairly narrow. So speeds on those streets are really limited. So I don't think that there's going to be a major change to vehicular speeds if and when streets change from two-way to one-way.
Hey, Carla, can I interject here?
Absolutely.
Matt Letourneau seems to have some questions, and is president of Neighbors of West Loop and somebody that's fairly knowledgeable on this issue. Can I suggest that we allow him to speak? And actually, while Carla's maybe working on that, if I may just ask a couple questions and make a statement, just for the community's information. You shared the parameters of the study. Was that mostly driven by just the fact that, obviously the parameters are within the 27th Ward, Fulton Market District? And I guess I would just be curious if we could expand on this study to go, south of Washington into the 34th Ward.
Is that a question? I'm sorry.
It is. Can you just confirm how you chose the parameters of the study, for one? And if you could maybe have a follow-up study that would include the neighborhood just south of Washington.
Sure. Steve, do you remember when we decided?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is driven by the boundaries of the TIF, for one. So that's where the funding can be used.
Okay, thank you for that. There may be some follow-up on that. Also, speaking for myself as a longtime resident and business owner and somebody that goes up and down these streets about every day, I just want to make a statement on ADA. I would highly be in favor of ADA if it's to be one way to go, be one way going north. And I think primarily because it seems just to make sense, and also it runs right into Ogden, which is kind of a natural way if you're making your way towards the entrance there onto the Kennedy going northbound. As it relates to green, I see you have it going one way, going south, but just kind of curious why south versus north.
Steve?
Yeah, let me pull that slide back up so we can talk from that. So I think one way northbound versus southbound, I think there's definitely some merit to both. In fact, I think at one point in one iteration we had been showing it as one way northbound, and we'd received some feedback, some local feedback that to leave it southbound because there's a lot of cars that turn off of Lake here to head south. that could become problematic if it were one way northbound. That's but other than that, I think there's still some there's merits to either direction. There's just kind of a slight edge to the southbound rather than northbound.
Well, thanks
But
for that explanation. I'd be curious to get more feedback from those on this call and beyond. So just one last question. Have you thought about making Washington a two-way bike lane instead of just one way going east?
I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer that on this call. That may be a question that is that could be directed to the CDOT's bike program. But yeah, that's not something that we had heard of previously. But I think there is, I don't know if that's part of the, so there is a study in progress on Washington. So maybe we can put you in contact with the appropriate people that are running that study. See where that's at, and if that's been a consideration.
As you know, it wouldn't be the first. I believe LaSalle is one street that comes to mind where there's a two. Where is it? Dearborn. I'm sure there are others. So it just seems to make sense in my own opinion. So yeah, looking forward to more discussion on that. However, let me get back to some of these other questions. Thank you, Nora. Yeah, Dearborn has a two-way bike lane. Carl, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Also, another comment or question rather from Matt Letourneau. Carl noted that the Randolph study is now in phase 1. Is this being led by CDOT or IDOT?
CDOT.
Thank you. Did pedestrian safety influence the recommendations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bike and pedestrian safety is paramount to anything.
The basis for my question there was just wondering, I can't recall if you had pedestrian crashes, bike crashes as part of the crash analysis, if that was separated out from the vehicular crashes and sideswipes.
Yeah, Matt, we have that information. There's just a lot of material in this presentation, so we couldn't include everything. But that will definitely be something that will be in the final report. We'll have all kinds of statistics and graphics and recommendations related to pedestrian safety and bike safety.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Steve. I just want to make sure that that's considered the predominant reason for the changes that are being made. Anything affecting traffic flow should be secondary to pedestrian and cyclist safety.
Yes, and including like missing sidewalks and everything. So those are in consideration. Wherever that. Okay, great. And thank you to WCA for putting me on the audio. I appreciate it. It's difficult to clarify exactly what questions are being asked when typing them. My question earlier about capacity and capacity improvements. We had a developer recently propose a project at the corner of Lake and Halsted, and we were told that there would be a left turn lane added and left turn movement. And I just wanted to make sure that as part of this study, that level of detail was being considered, that we're not just becoming too fixated on one-way pairs at a couple of locations, but that this study will in fact lead to capacity analysis-based improvements at all intersections in the study area, or at least most, where the problems are most severe.
Yeah, I'll answer that too. Again, it's a similar answer to the pedestrian question you asked. Yes, there is there's comprehensive capacity analyses that have been done. It's quite quite a lift to do 85 intersections, but yes, that is part of it.
Yeah.
It's just like not kind of outside of the scope of this presentation to show all that information.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I guess that begs the follow-up question: will the draft documentation as well as the slides be made available for community review?
But draft, I think that it still needs work. So, but then presentation, I think we can share.
Right. We wanted to get this presentation.
Right.
We split off the one-way street direction portion of the study, kind of moving ahead of the rest of the study just because of the timeline and wanting to get that moving so we could get the railroad crossing improvements moving. So that's kind of why you're seeing that out in front of everything else at this point.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can certainly appreciate that. Want to keep things moving. You know, yeah, the Randolph study for one, it's been 3 years now since we all got together, and I'm still eager to see where that's headed. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that any near-term improvements, those capacity improvements with signal timing and other such improvements can be made in the near term. If I could just, I guess, maybe close with a comment. I'm very excited to see the recommendations that they include bike lanes. I think that's a big step forward and is a differentiator for this one-way pair proposal along May and Racine. Incidentally, Neighbors of West Loop came up with a similar concept a couple of years ago that almost exactly mirrors what you've been showing. So it's good to see that that's in line with our thinking. I wonder if there are any other east-west one-way proposals to go along with it. I know Kinsey is one way up to the area where you're proposing. Are you then proposing to keep Kinsey two-way west of that? And there is sort of a wonky intersection at Racine and Kinsey, a triangular intersection. Is that going to stay as is? There's some developments proposed there. I wanted to ask about that. And I guess, sorry, one last thing. Did this study include volume projections that include all of the various proposed developments? Sorry to cram so much into the question, but a lot on my list. Thanks.
Well, yeah. We'll start with the east-west one-way street conversation. Yeah, we're looking at that. So a lot of these east-west streets get a little bit tricky. I think kind of like you mentioned with especially as they get further west towards Ogden. We didn't see any reason to change any of these streets to one way, especially if you're converting some of these north-south streets to one way, leaving the east-west streets as two-way, like Carroll intersecting. That kind of helps to maintain mobility through Fulton Market. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, we did look at that, and we are not recommending any changes to east-west streets. So development questions, we're coordinating with DPD as projects come through here. We're making sure, so if there's like a signal that is on that we've found is warranted, or there's signal improvements or some other improvement that's near the development, we want to make sure that developer is going to incorporate that into their planned development. So every time a new proposal for site development comes in, CDOT and DPD, they shoot the plan this way, and that's all included. So accommodations for future traffic growth as well. So yes, that is, to answer your question, that's accounted for. And I don't know if you had a third question there. Did I get them all?
Yeah, no, I think you did. Yeah, incorporating projected volumes from developers seems to be a constantly moving target. We see a lot of proposals focused on a one block area, and I'm glad to hear that those one-off projections are being incorporated in and overlaid on top of each other. I think that has a lot to do with why the graphs you showed earlier demonstrate the traffic volumes have very quickly caught up to 28 to pre-pandemic levels, because we have that many more buildings with that many more residents here now. Not to mention business. I mean, we're a thriving neighborhood, you know, thanks to WCA and others that are putting in the time. So all of that growth is leading to constantly increasing traffic volumes, and I'm glad to hear that that's being considered, and then that's hopefully being projected further into the future, that we're not just solving for problems today, but solving for problems well into the future.
Hey, Matt, let me
Yeah.
just jump in on that. You know, I mean, obviously this is a fluid situation as the neighborhood continues to evolve, and for that reason, I would ask the aldermen and everyone here involved to just kind of keep an open mind and be prepared to revisit as the neighborhood continues to change. So it's just tough to make decisions today for what we don't know in the future. Again, I commend everything that has been done so far to get us to this point. I have to have this discussion, but yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you, Matt. As I think we should revisit this in the near term when necessary.
Yeah, something that we can get out to the community would be great. Something more than, I don't know how many attendees there are right now, but it was already mentioned that there's a conflicting meeting at the same time. So whatever we can do to get broader community input would be helpful. We did, I mean, to be full disclosure, when we did come up with the concept, Neighbors of West Loop, that is, with a one-way pair along Main and Racine, we brought that to some community members in Fulton Market, and they didn't like it. I don't know if they're on the line today, but you know, I think there will be some greater feedback that you'll get beyond me just asking question after question along with a couple of others here. Thanks.
Well, thanks for all of that, Matt. Maybe it's a good time to go back to the questions. So Carla, back to you.
Great. Allison, Glenn, do you consider pedestrian safety in determining need for traffic lights at intersections like Green and Randolph, or is that based on car volume?
The answer to that question is yes, it's both. It's car volume and pedestrian volume. There's certain thresholds that are set forth by the federal government, by FHWA, that need to be met, and those are evaluated when you're looking at the need for a traffic signal.
Thank you. From Dr. Block. From the initial traffic study request, data gathering, analysis, etc., what is the usual turnaround time from beginning to end on average?
Is that the turnaround time to do traffic study?
From the initial request, gathering the data, doing the analysis, what's the turnaround time from beginning to end on average?
Well, I think that depends on the scope of the traffic study. So this study started, this study was delayed a bit because, of course, it had to start right, you know, during COVID. So there was a long period of time when it was very, well, you couldn't collect any data at all. So the study was put on hold, and now with traffic rebounding finally 2022, 2023, the study is moving forward. So you know, for a typical study like this, I mean, it's a big study with 85 intersections. So it's probably a generally, you know, if COVID weren't a factor, it'd probably be somewhere in the range of a two-year study.
Thank you. When do you anticipate implementing the railroad crossing improvements?
So that is either in 2026 or 2027.
And the last that we have, the last Q&A that's open is from Allison Glenn. I've seen cars that appear to think green is one-way driving southbound in the northbound lane on Green in Greektown to the south of the study area. Will making green one way for only 2 blocks potentially create more confusion in the area just south of there, or it is back to 2-way?
Well,
Yeah, well,
I'll just mention,
go
yeah.
ahead, Carl.
Well, I would just mention that, the boundary of this study was kind of tied to kind of that TIF boundary. This is by no means something that can't be evaluated. We can certainly look further, could consider 2-way conversion in coordination with the ward office and the community. So that's certainly something that, any of the recommendations here could theoretically be revisited outside of the borders that are shown here on this particular study.
And one final comment from Matt Letourneau. Recommendations like those included in the discussion should not replace the need to enforce double parking and other traffic violations. Noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and also note that there is a curbside use component to this study, so that's not touched on today, but that's also will be in the final report.
Are there any other questions at this time? Any of the panelists want to share any final words before we conclude?
Yes, I just want to say thank you all for coming and sharing. This is nothing written in stone, so we all got to work together on this plan.
And then just a thought, a question, if maybe we should set a time for, a comment period for greater community to pass along feedback. I don't know if any of you guys have thought about that, whether it be 1 week, 2 weeks, a month. And have you guys thought about that, or is there, want to leave it open-ended for now? Just it might be good to kind of set a timeline on that.
Yeah, I definitely think there should be a public feedback period, minimum a couple weeks, but I mean,
there was mention of an October 2nd meeting, so perhaps we could go a little after that, just to, in the event that hopefully we can join and present some version of this again, or at the very least, this slide could be shared there potentially. So perhaps we should target something after October 2nd.
Great, thank you.
Carl, thank you so much. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us over at West Central Association, the Alderman's office as well. And we will make certain to circulate those questions back to the various departments at CDOT, as well as DPD. And on that, everyone, I believe our meeting has concluded. Thank you all so very much for your time and consideration for tonight. A copy of this meeting will be available online.